Now here's the next question. Ma'am, what will happen if when I'll transfer the constant to the other side, it will become a negative number? Is there a square root for a negative number? Who can give that answer? Is there a square root for a negative number? Like square root of negative 100. Does a
I think
negative
no.
number?
Ma'am, I
No.
think there's none po.
Oh, why do you think so?
It's negative.
Because it's negative. Because you see, once you will square a number, the answer is always positive, right? Like 1 squared, 1. Even if it's negative 1 squared, it's still positive 1. So any number raised to the power of 2, the answer is always positive. But in math, we have what we call real numbers. These are the numbers that you can see, like negative 1, positive 1. These are real numbers. And we'll have what we call imaginary numbers. Based on the root word imagine. We just imagine these numbers, but they exist not in the real world, but in the complex world. Now, in the real world, there's no square root for a negative number. But in the complex number system, in the imaginary numbers, there is. But we call them imaginary roots. Now, how will this work? Example, if the constant is negative and you'll have the square root of that, we need to multiply it by I squared, because I squared is equivalent to negative 1. So for example, square root of negative 100. Remember, I squared is equal to negative 1. So if we place here 100 times negative 1, and negative 1 is I squared, so we call that 100 I squared. The square root of 100 is plus and minus 10. The square root of I squared is I. So the square root of negative 100 is plus and minus 10i. Let me give you the simplest technique. The simplest technique is, if you're looking for the square root of a negative number, you find its main square root, then add I. I means imaginary. So example, square root of negative 9. What's the square root of 9? Plus and minus 3. But this is a negative number. So, dapat na apelyido. Yung apelyido, I. So, the answer is plus and minus 3i. Do you get it? So, let's have a drill. What's the square root of negative 49? Ready? In our chat box. I'll give you 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Very good. The answer is plus and minus 7i. Or, how do I write it? It can be 7i and the other is negative 7i. Again, there should be an I because it's a negative number. Let's have more practice. Ready? There. We have this a while ago, right? In our first example. Transfer 121 to the other side. It becomes x squared equals negative 121. Square root both sides. Square root, square root. So x equals, what's the square root of 121? It's plus and minus 11.
11.
Very good. It's a negative number. So what will you add? You add an I. Oh,
I.
very good. Plus and minus 11i. Very good. Next. This one. Transfer 16 to the other side. So we have x squared equals negative 16. Next, step 2. Apply the square root property. Square root on the left, square root on the right. So we have x equals, what's the square root of 16? Plus and minus?
4i.
4, very good. It's a negative number, so you add the surname, I. Very good. Let's have the problem. I know most of you, your favorite is problem solving. Now, here's the problem. The middle portion of a stage is to be covered with a red carpet. The carpet is a square. So remember, the square has equal sides, right? And the area of the square is 64 meters squared. The question, what is the length of the side of the carpet? What are we asking for? We're asking for the length. So we say, let x, we don't know the length, right? So let's represent it with a variable. Let x be the length of the carpet. Area. How do you find the area of a square? But in grade 7, that is the main formula for area is length times width. But since in the square, the length is x, the width is x, so we say x times x. So x squared, what's the area? Equals 64 meters squared. Step 1. Step 2, apply the square root property. Square root on the left, square root on the right. So x equals plus and minus 8 meters squared. But remember, this is a scalar. You have it in physics also. What do you mean by scalar? If you say scalar quantity, these are measures that are always positive. It means it will never get a negative. Measurements are scalar quantity. Remember, di ba? When you measure something, you don't say, negative 8 meters. You just take the positive answer. So the final answer will be, the length is 8 meters. Oh, no, that's squared. 8 meters. You drop the negative 1. Do we have any questions?